This is a demo by Sankey for the IBM Technical Proficiency Badge for IBM OpenPages. The system that we're looking at here is a Docker 8.2 image, 8.202, where I've created some new objects, training risks and training controls linked to a business entity for the purpose of the demonstration. So as we're logged in here, we're logged in as the administrator, but it's showing the initial dashboard of an operational risk manager who would have access to typically to risks and controls that are going through various assessments. So the dashboard is being pre-configured by the administrator to show me a count of risks by status and a count of controls also by the workflow status in these two panels here. And if we hover over either of these panels, then it will show us how many are in each of these donuts. So I've got two complete, one pending residual risk and one pending inherent. Likewise on the controls, I've got two completed and two pending assessments. So other aspects of the dashboard then, so we've got our favourites panel here, so any object in the system can be tagged as a favourite. So if I navigate to a particular risk or control, and I can do that by clicking on the hyperlinks anywhere where these numbers appear. So I'll go into the one that's pending residual. So this will take me to a list of all pending residual, which there's one, and then I'll click on the link to go into that particular risk. So this is training risk 41. At the top of the screen there's a little asterisk or a star. If I click that star and then go back to my home page, you'll now see that that training risk is added as a favourite. And we can select and deselect those, so that's certainly a very useful feature for users. We can also have an add new panel, so for adding new risks and controls, a nice quick easy way of adding a new risk. So let's go and add a risk. So we click on add risk and that takes us to the creation view of the risk. So in demo risk 1, description test risk. The assessor I'm going to set as the OpenPages administrator, and then I'll associate it to a business entity. And let's just pick those CCSL ones, pick a CCSL training, done. And that's all we need to do to create a new risk, so we can hit save, and that risk will now immediately go into the workflow for the inherent risk assessment. And we'll see this open up in a second. The system will assign a new ID, training risk 61. So there's training risk 61, and we can see using our right-hand panel over here that the stage is the inherent risk assessment. And on the right-hand side, when we're looking at the views of this data, if we're using workflow, we can also configure additional information for what's going on in that workflow stage. So in this case, the risk needs to have the inherent risk assessment done. We'll come back to these screens again in a moment. Let's go back to our home page. So that's how we can add a new object. And we've also got a small My Task panel that shows me any workflow tasks assigned. And that literally just gives me a count and the top 5 here. If I want to see my tasks in more detail, I can use the panel called My Tasks and click on that in the top. And that will give me a more detailed view of each of those objects with a calendar view at the top about when these things are due. Subscription and oversight are different types of workflow tasks, but all related to workflow. Now, the dashboard is completely configurable by the end user. So imagine that I want to create a new panel and I want to have a count of risks that are rated low. Well, let's go and add in a filter, a new panel. So I'll call it risk counts. We add a widget. The widget is of type filter count. I'm going to go to my training risk object. And I'm going to say inherent rating very high. So we've got a filter called very high and click done. And this creates our new panel. Now again, we can move these around. I might want that count next to my control, my risk panel, and then I might want to make it bigger. Now again, I might also want a count of the low risks. So how do I do that? Well, I can go to navigate to my risk view. So I can go to my main navigation view and go to training risks. That takes me to the grid view that we saw before, and then clicking on the filter button on the left, we can then add a new filter. In this case, I'll say low inherent, add the condition, and the field that we want is the residual risk rating, and we want low. Done. And we'll say residual low. Let's say save. So that's created the new filter. By default, it will now apply that filter. I can see I've got one in there. But let's go back to our dashboard. And what I want to do is add that count into our risk count dashboard here. So we'll edit the panels, go to our risk counts panel, add another widget, which is also a filter count. It's also on the training risk object. And now our new residual low is in there. So we can do done, done, done. And that now adds in that second count. So we've got one of those and one of those. So that's really the dashboard. Really very nice, neat way presenting the data to the users. Very clean interface, allowing the users to move these panels around. And also they can hide panels if they, for example, if they don't want to have the control panel in there, they can click on the panel here and then go to controls and use the visible icon to say hide it, and then that just disappears. Hasn't deleted it, it's created by the admin, so they can't delete it, but they can show and hide it. And bring that back there. So that's the dashboard. If we go back to our filter searches, let's take a look back, maybe go to this inherent rating high here. So having filtered the data, created filters here, we can also do additional filters using our business entity structure. So if we only want to find objects in the financial planning area, we can do done and just pick that tree. You can see these filters are applied up here. Removing of the filter is simple. We just click on the X and that removes it. So really simple. We can export the data to Excel. So we click on the little export icon in here and that will give us some options. We can export up to 3 related objects. So from risk, we can also export its associated controls. And then in this case, files, which are attachments. So in this case, I might do risks and controls. For the demo, I'll just do export of the risk. I've already done this just to save a little bit of time. So if I open up Excel, you'll see here now that that comes exported to Excel with all of the fields on from the view. So all of the fields on there, not just the ones that are in the grid. We can also use this to update data in the system in bulk. So it's called FastMap. So we can take that same export to Excel, make some changes, and then if we have access to FastMap, load it back to the system and that will make the changes in the system for us. We've got in the view, so if we go to our views of our data, so let's go back to our training risk here. Let's see where it is in the workflow. So at the moment it's not in any workflow. We can see that because there's no workflow stage appearing at the top here. So if we said start assessment of the training risk, this is going to start the workflow off. Okay, that's not a good example. Let me go to the training risk 41. This one's already in, so let's take this one through. So the first stage it wants us to do is the inherent risk assessment, and then once we've completed that, to do we'll go and have a look at the control ratings. So in this case, we'll go and enter all our values. So I'm going to enter major for this, and notice before I select anything else, we've got some calculated values. So this section here, risk calculations, it's taking the highest value from any of these inherents. That's the way the calculation is configured. And again, this is fully configurable by the system administrator. And we've also assigned a score of 4 to that. So the major is assigned to 4. And we can do that across all of these. And then we look at also the probability. So let's take a look at the probability. And we'll say that it's highly probable. Again, the minute we do this in real time, we can see the probability score of 4 coming out, and then again the inherent rating score is inherent risk impact score times probability, which is 16, and that results in an inherent risk rating of very high. So system performing some automatic business calculations, very neat. Now, if we look at the options up here, I can't save this, and we can see why not, because we've got an inherent rating justification here in the bars. So this little section here shows us all our fields to complete. Once it's all green, then we'd be able to save. But because we've got a red one, and it's telling us inherent rating justification needs to be filled in, we need to fill that in. Now we can navigate directly to that by clicking on inherent rating justification, and that takes us directly to the field. And now the blue bar appears. Just pull that over a bit, and we can hit save. So once we've saved this, we can then move it on in the workflow using our action button. And then the option here is to complete the inherent. So let's complete the inherent risk rating, and this will take us to the next stage of the workflow. Okay, and that takes us to the residual risk assessment. And notice what happens now in the screen is our inherent risk section is collapsed, and our control section is opened up. Now, at the moment, we don't have any controls for this particular risk, so we can either add a new control or associate. Let me go and associate an existing control, and I'll add in this training control 21. So that's an effective control. And we can also use the side view. So there's a couple of things here. So because this is an associated piece of data, we can see it as part of the risk, but we can either use the side panel over here that allows us to view and actually update that data. So we can see all of the fields on here, and we can see the cost of that control is actually 50. Or we can open it in full view. So we can do that either by the icon here opening tab, or we can click on the ID here, which also opens it in full view. So that would allow us to take this again through its own workflow and edit and save. In this case, I'll just come back to the training risk. And what you can notice here now with refresh the object is the count controls is 50. So this particular control has a cost of 50, and that's again another automatic system calculation being performed there for us. The other thing that we can do on these objects is attach or make attachments. So in this case, I'll say associate an existing attachment. So rather than, and we don't actually have any in this demo system, so let me go and add a new one. So rather than keep attachments offline, you can actually link that attachment and assign it into OpenPages, and it will store it on the server. So that export I did of the training risk, I'll just add that object and click on upload. So that will now add it into this into the system and link it to this particular risk. I'll just let that complete. There is a little workflow behind this one. So there's our export training risk, and the other thing that we can do with this is check it in, check it out. So again, if we want to make changes to this particular object, we can check it out, make changes and check it back in. And the system will also keep a complete history of all the changes to the attachments and to all the objects. So you can see this activity tab up in here. So any changes being made to this risk, you can see what was added. So in this case, the file was added and who did it. If it's a field change, you can see the name of the field, what it was, the old value and the new value, who changed it and when. If there's an automatic system calculation, like the total cost of that control, again, you can see it went from 0 to 50 and the system performed that. So the entire system has change control around it, which is really neat. The other thing that we might do in the task view is look at the complete relationships. So we know that this risk might be linked to controls, and the controls might be linked to other objects. The risk might be linked to a parent business entity. So using the tree view, we can use the tree view here, and we can see there's one control. If we click on the number 1, it will actually show us what that control is. If we click on the one file, it will show us what that file is. Click on business entity and so on. So this is really, really neat visualization. If we want to go to that particular object, so for example, if we want to go to, let me just maximize this one. So if we want to go to that particular training control, we can click on the training controls there, and that will show us all the child objects there in the card view. If we click on the number, it will show us the ID, and if we click on the ID, it will take us to the actual training control. And again, from there we can edit it and take it into workflow, etc. So again, really neat, powerful. Now, as I said before, the system is completely configurable for workflows, views, and calculations. So if I take a quick look at the workflows to start with, let's take a look at the risk workflow. So we've seen how the user interacts with it with the actions on the menu, but just very briefly, it's a very visual piece for the administrator as well. So here's the assessment of the training risk workflow. So we've got drag and drop stages that we can bring in. So we're starting with the inherent risk assessment, moving on to residual, moving on to completed. And within each of these options, so if we're moving from inherent to residual, we can say what the label is that users should see. So in this case, complete inherent, whether any options are captured, whether we email anybody on the transition. So as we say we've completed the inherent, we might want to email the target assignees so that they know now that the residual is now due. We can also put conditions on this, so only do this when certain conditions are met. We can set fields, we can create objects, all sorts of crazy stuff that we can do, all with configuration, no customization required. So workflow is very, very powerful. That's that one. The other thing that we've got is the views themselves. So if we take a look at the administrator's view for this training risk 61, so we can go to the view of the training risk, and again we've got a WYSIWYG kind of drag and drop method of adding fields into the view, including sections, fields. We can set rules. So for example, if I look at my inherent risk impact calculation, so this is allowing me to set colors based on the categorization. if we scroll that one down, let's have a look at the columns here. So we can set how many columns, between 1 and 4 columns. So that positions our data across. That tree view that we looked at is simply a tree relationship view object that we drag over from the left-hand side. So really nice, powerful ways, very simple configuration for the administrator. And then finally, we've got calculations. So let's take a look at the calculations menu. So we looked at the total risk control. So let's have a look at our risk object, and it will be the training risk. So here we've got our training risk calculate cost. In this case, we can see we have an input field, which is the cost of control coming from the related control. So here we've got object type is the control, direct child. And then from those controls, we want to take the field, which is the total cost of control. So in this case, it was saying if there is at least one, so if the cost of controls exists, then simply sum it up. Otherwise, we'll set the value to be a zero currency. So cost of control, if we take a look in here, is pulling it from the training control cost of control field, which is a currency field. And that's all we need to do then to refer to it in the formula to say sum up the cost of control. And all we're doing around that is putting a little bit of validation to say only do this if they exist, and that avoids any kind of errors. So again, really nice, neat way for the administrator to configure the system. We've also got Cognos Analytics. So within each of our views and menus, we can add in reports. I'm not sure if I've got any on here. Let's take a look. Let's just add a report panel. Panel here, and we'll add a reports. And we'll just do all reports in this case. So here's our report panel coming up down here. And this is just going to show all reports in the system that we have access to. So we might look at control reports and then run maybe, let's do one of the admin reports. Yeah, I suspect these aren't going to work because I've changed my system. So I could try perhaps doing top risk. So it'll probably fail, but you can see what will happen is it integrates with Cognos, runs a Cognos report, and the output of that report then would get displayed on the desktop. Let's just see whether that will run. And from an admin perspective, we can just click on the analytics, take us to the analytics, Cognos Analytics portal, and that's where we can develop new reports, dashboards, etc., and have those fully integrated into the reporting solution. Now, security, I'll let that run in the background. Security access is based on our profile and the roles that we're assigned in the system. So typically based on the business entity structure. So again, if we look at that entity structure, training risks. So we might say a particular user only has access, for example, to this CCSL training. So they'll see all the objects that role gives them access to. So if they have like an op risk manager role, we might give them access to risks and controls and issues and actions and attachments and business entities. So that would be the logical grouping. But we'd only assign it at this place here. So there might be risks and controls in, say, the global financial services part of the structure, but they wouldn't have any access if they're only given access to CCSL training. And that security is taken through into Cognos as well. So if you run a Cognos report, you can only see the data that you're permissioned to see. I'm logged in as an administrator, so therefore I can see all objects in the system. So that completes the demonstration for the purposes of the technical badge. I've not been able to demonstrate anything to do with the Watson integration because I don't have that currently configured on my Docker, but hopefully that was of use. Thank you very much.